Hello everyone, welcome back to my English, My Fluency Journey. And in this video, this is a live session and we are reading the Sapiens book. So today we are starting with the capitalist grid. The capitalist creed, which is the capitalist faith and beliefs. This is a 16th chapter of the Sapiens. The Sapiens meaning is it's a book about a brief history of humankind and written by Yuval Noah Harari. So yeah, I will. In this video, we're just gonna learn some new vocabularies and some advanced vocabularies and their meanings and their uses, how the author use it in the books, and I will also understand. I will also understand the books. Means I will also understand the learnings and some new things from the books. So yeah, Winnie founded states and ruined them, opened new horizons and enslaved millions, moved the wheels of industry and drove hundreds of species into extinction. Yet, to understand modern economic history, you really need to understand just a single word. The word is growth. Okay, means we need to understand the word which is growth. For better to worse, in sickness and in health, the modern economy has been growing like a hormone-soused teenager. Hormone-soused. Hormone-soused. Okay, hormone-soused teenager, right? Which is completely soaked or drenched in the periods often used to describe teenagers for in intense emotional or physical development. Humorous and dramatic tone. Okay, so intoxicated. I'm not teenager, I'm adult. Okay, it eats up everything it can find and puts on inch faster than you can count. For most of history, the economic for most of the history, the economy stayed much the same size. Yes, global production increased, but this was mostly due to demographic expansion and the settlement of new land. Per capita production remained static, but all that changed in the modern age. In 1500, global production of goods and services was equal to $250 billion. Today it hovers around $60 trillion. More importantly, in 1500, annual per capita production averaged $550, while today every man, woman, and child produces on average $8,800 a year. What accounts for this stupendous growth? Stupendous. Stupendous we didn't use. Okay, extremely impressive or astonishing. Stupendous is extremely impressive. Economics is a notoriously complicated subject. To make things easier, let's imagine a simple example. Samuel Greedy, a shrewd financier, founds a bank in El Dorado, California. A. Stone, an up-and-moving contractor in El Dorado, finishes his first big job, receiving payment in cash to the tune of $1 million. He deposits this sum in Mr. Greedy's bank. The bank now has $1 million in capital. In the meantime, Jane McDonald, an experienced but impecunious. What is impecunious? Impecunious El Dorado chef thinks she's a business opportunity. There is no really good bakery in her part of town, having little money or no money. But impecunious, having little or no money. Okay, but she doesn't have enough money for her of her own to buy a proper facility complete with industrial ovens, sinks, knives, and pots. She goes to the bank, presents her business plan to Greedy, and persuades him that it's a whole worthwhile investment. He issues her a $1 million loan by crediting her account in the bank with that sum. Mr. Donald now hires Stone, the contractor, to build and furnish her bakery. His price is $1 million. When she pays him with a check drawn on her account, Stone deposited in his account in the Greedy bank. So how much money does Stone have in his bank account, right? 2 million. How much money cash is actually located in the bank safe? Yes, 1 million. It doesn't stop there. As contractors want to do 2 months into the job, Stone informs McDonald that due to unforeseen problems and expenses, the bill for constructing the bakery will actually be 2 million. Mr. McDonald is not pleased, but she can hardly stop the job in the middle. So she pays another visit to the bank, convinces Mr. Greedy to give her an additional loan, and he puts another 1 million in her account. She transferred the money to the contractor's account. How much money does Stone have in his account now? Right, he is called 2 million. But how much money is actually sitting in the bank? Still just 1 million. In fact, the same 1 million that has been in the bank all along. Current US banking law permits the bank to repeat this exercise 7 more times. The contractor would eventually have 10 million in his account, even though the bank still has but 1 million in its vaults. Banks are allowed to loan $10 for every dollar they actually process, which means that 90% of all the money in our bank account is not covered by actual coins and notes. If all of the account holders at Barclays banks suddenly demand their money, Barclays will promptly collapse. The same is true of Lloyds, Deutsche Bank, Citibank, and all other banks in the world. It sounds like a giant Ponzi scheme, doesn't it? But if it's a fraud, then the entire modern economy is a fraud. But the fact is, it's not a deception, but rather a tribute to the amazing abilities of human imagination. What enables banks and the entire economy to survive and flourish in our as our trust in the future. This trust is also sole backing for most of the company trust. So what enables banks? So humans trust most in the entire animal kingdom. In the bakery example, the discrepancy between the discrepancy between the contractor's account statement and the amount of money actually in the bank is Mr. McDonald's bakery. Mr. Greedy has put the bank's money as into asset, trusting that one day it would be profitable. The bakery hasn't baked a loaf of bread yet, but McDonald, McDonald and Greedy anticipate that a year hence it will be selling thousands of loaves, rolls, cakes, and cookies each day at a handsome profit. Mr. McDonald will then be able to repay her loan with interest. If at that point Mr. Stone decides to withdraw his selling, the Greedy will be able to come up with a cash. The entire enterprise is thus founded in the trust is in an imaginary future. The trust that the entrepreneur and the banker have in the bakery of their dreams, along with the contractor trust and the futures solvency of the bank. Future solvency. Ability to meet financial obligations. Okay, liquidity or enough assets. We have already seen that money is an astounding thing because it can represent minor different objects and convert anything into almost anything else. However, before the modern era, this ability was limited. In most cases, the money could represent and convert only things that actually existed in the present, and this imposes several limitations on growth. Since it made it very hard to finance new enterprises. Consider our bakery again. Could McDonald get it built if money could represent only tangible objects? No. In the present, she has a lot of dreams but no tangible resources. The only way she could get a bakery built would be to find a contractor willing to work today and receive payments in a few years' times. If and when the bakery starts making money, alas, such contractors are rare breeds. So our entrepreneur is in a bind. Without a bakery, she can't bake cakes. Without cakes, she can't make money. Without money, she can't hire a contractor. Without a contractor, she has no bakery. Humankind was trapped in this predicament of thousands of years. Predicament. P-R-E-D-I-C-A. Predicament. So humankind was trapped in this predicament for thousands of years. This difficult and unpleasant situation. Dilemma. In this dilemma. Okay, in this tricky situations. As a result, economies remained frozen. The way out of the trap was discovered only in the modern era, with the appearance of a new system based on the trust in the future in it. People agreed to represent imaginary goods which do not exist in the present, with a special kind of money that they call credit. Credit enables us to build the present at the expense of future. It's founded on the assumption that our future resources are sure to be far more abundant than our present resources. A host of new and wonderful opportunities open up if we can build things in the present using future income. If credit is such a wonderful thing, why did nobody think of it earlier? Of course they did. Credit arrangements of one kind or another have existed in all human cultures, going back at least to the ancient Sumer. The problem in previous eras was not that no one had the idea or knew how to use it. It was the people seldom wanted to extend much credit because they didn't trust that future would be better than present. They generally believed that times past they had been better than their own times and that the future would be worse or at the best much be the same. To put that in economic terms, they believed that the total amount of wealth was limited, if not dwindling. People therefore considered it a bet to assume that they personally or their kingdom or an entire world would be producing more wealth than years down the line. Business looked like a zero sum game. Of course, the profits of one particular bakery might rise, but only at the expense of the bakery next door. Venice might flourish, but only by improvising Giona. The king of England might enrich himself, but only by robbing the king of France. You could cut the pie in the many different ways, but it never got any bigger. That's why many cultures concluded that making bundles of money was sinful. As Jesus said, it's easier for a camel to pass through the eye of a needle than for a rich man to enter into the kingdom of God. If a pie is aesthetic and I have a big part of it, then I must have taken somebody else's size. The rich were penance for their obliged to do penance for their evil deeds by giving some surplus wealth to the charity. Okay, penance. Okay, voluntary act of self-discipline. Deep sincere regret, contrition. Act to seek forgiveness. Successfully, if the global pie stayed the same size, there was no margin for credit. Credit is the difference between today's pie and tomorrow's pie. If the pie stays the same, why action is created? It would be an unexpectable risk unless you believe that a baker or a king asking for your money might be able to steal a slice from a competitor. So it was hard to get a loan in the pre-modern world. And when we got one, it was usually small, short-term, and subject to high interest rates. Upstart entrepreneurs thus found it difficult to open new bakeries, and great kings who wanted to build palaces or wage wars had no choice but to raise the necessary funds through high taxes and tariffs. That was fine for kings, but a scullery maid who had a great idea for bakery and wanted to move up in the world generally could only dream of wealth while scrubbing down the royal kitchen floor. Scullery. See you. Scullery. Scullery is a small room. Scullery maid. Small room or section of kitchen used for cleaning dishes, food preparation, and other domestic chores. Small section of kitchen for cleaning dishes, preparing food, etc. So yeah, no bakery, no cake, no money, no contractor. This is just like an cycle. You can see and that, right? So it was lose because credit was limited. People had trouble financing new businesses because there were few new businesses. The economy did not grow. Because it did not grow, people assumed it never would, and those who had capital were wary of extending credit. And the expectation of stagnation fulfilled itself. The expectation of stagnation. Stagnation is what is बहुत गंदा, right? It's, uh, lack of movement, lack of progress, inertia. Trust in the future, credit. Paying contractor, new bakeries, cakes that pays back loans. This is the magic cycle of the modern economy. That's why we are going so much continuously, a growing pie. Then came the scientific revolution and the idea of progress. The idea of progress is built on the notion that if we admit our ignorance and invest resources in research, things can improve. This idea was soon translated into economic terms. Whoever believes in progress believes that geographical discoveries, technological inventions, and organizational developments can increase the sum total of human production, trade, and wealth. New trade routes in the Atlantic could flourish without ruining old routes in the Indian Ocean. New goods could be produced without reducing the production of old ones. For instance, one could open a new bakery specializing in chocolate cakes and croissant with, croissant without causing bakeries specializing in bread to go bust. To go bust means to go in hell or to go bust. To go bust. It's nice proverb, right? To go bust becomes bankrupt. To go bust is nice. Everybody would simply develop new tests and eat more. I can be wealthy without your becoming poor. I can be obese without your dying of hunger. The entire global pie can grow. Over the last 500 years, the idea of progress convinced people to put more and more trust in the future. This trust created credit brought real economic growth, and the growth strengthened the trust in the future and opened the way for even more credit. It didn't happen overnight. The economy behaved more like a roller coaster than a balloon. But over the long run, with the bumps evened out, the general direction was unmistakable. Today, there is so much credit in the world that government, business corporations, and private individuals easily obtain large, long-term, and low-interest loans that far exceed current income. The belief in the growing global pie eventually turned revolutionary. In 1776, the Scottish economist Adam Smith published The Wealth of Nations, probably the most important economics manifesto of all times. Okay. Adam Smith published The Wealth of Nations, which is the most important economic manifesto. Manifesto is what? What is manifesto? Please, your manifesto. Give me your manifesto. Means the government gives manifesto, right? Now this is BJP's manifesto. This is Congress manifesto. What is manifesto? A public declaration of beliefs, right? Or goals. A public declaration of beliefs and goals. In the 8th chapter of its first volume, Smith made the following novel argument. When a landlord, a weaver, or a shoemaker has greater profit than he needs to maintain his own family, he uses the surplus to employ more assistants in order to further increase his profits. The more profit he has, the more assistants he can employ. It follows that an increase in the profits of the private entrepreneurs is the basis for the increase in the collective wealth and the prosperity. You know, prosperity is successful, right? Prosperity is successful. Flourishing, success. Flourishing, thriving, and success. This will not strike you as very original because we all live in a capitalist world that takes Smith's argument for granted. We hear variation on this scheme every day in the news. Yet Smith's claim that the selfish human urge to increase private profits is the basis for collective wealth is one of the most revolutionary ideas in the human history. Revolutionary not just from economic perspective, but even more so from a moral and the political perspective. What Smith says is in fact that greed is good. What Smith says in fact is greed is good, and that by becoming richer I benefit everybody and not just myself. Egoism is altruism. Oh, Adam Smith is means great economic influencer, right? So greed is good, and that by becoming richer I benefit everybody, not just myself. Egoism is altruism. Altruism. Selfless. Yes. So egoism is altruism. What it means Ego means selfless. Selfish is equal to selfish is equal to selfless. Philosophical bridges. Psychological egoism claims that all actions are fundamentally self-serving. Ethical egoism. Reciprocal altruism. Okay, rhetorical power. Egoism is altruism. Dance around the nexus of self-interest and collective good. Your curiosity is a perfect match for those intellectual fireworks. Would like to explain how thinkers like. Okay, egoism is altruism. This philosophical provocation, highlighting how intention and outcome interplay and challenge more absolutism. Okay, what is. Firstly, understand what is egoism. Acting in one's own self-interest. Altruism is acting in interest of others. Often self-sacrificial. Selfish means selfish and selfless. These two words are very good for describing these advanced phenomena, advanced philosophies. Smith taught people to think about the economy as a win-win situation in which my profits are also your profits. Not only can we both enjoy a bigger slice of pie at the same time, but the increase in your slice depends upon the increase in my slice. If I am poor, you too will be poor since I cannot buy your products or services. If I am rich, you too will be enriched since you can now sell me something. Smith denied the traditional contradiction between wealth and morality and threw open the gates of heaven for the rich. Being rich means being no moral. In Smith's story, people become rich not by despoiling their neighbors, but by increasing the overall size of the pie. Despoiling. And being rich is normal. Yeah, right. Yeah, that's why I'm normal, right? Means he says that you do not have to spoil others to become rich. Everybody can be rich at the same time. Okay. Okay, dispelling means stealing or violently striving away. Stealing away. Stealing. Ravage. Rampage. Rampage means uncontrollably. Spread uncontrollably or. Hmm. And when the pie grows, everyone benefits. The rich are accordingly the most useful and the benevolent people in the society. Yeah, benevolent. I know that word. I've already searched the word for many things, right? I didn't know. Kind and generous. Okay. Belleno. Kind, hearted, generous people. Okay, because they turn the wheel of the growth for everyone's advantage, right? All this depends, however, on the rich using their profits to open new factories and hire new employees, rather than wasting them on non-productive activities. Ismin therefore repeated like a mantra that maxim that when profit increase, the landlord or the weaver will employ more assistant, and not when profits increase, Scrooge will hoard his money in a chest and take it out only to count as coins. A crucial part of the modern capitalist economy was the emergence of a new ethic, according to which profit ought to be reinvested in production. This brings about more profits, which are again reinvested in production, which brings more profit, etc. ad infinitum. Investment can be made in many ways: enlarging the factory, conducting scientific research, developing new products. Yet all these investments must somehow increase production and translate into larger profits. And the new capitalist creed, the first and the most sacred commandment is The profits of the production must be reinvested in the increasing production. Sacred production. Sacred means holy. Commandment. Commandment is something, saying or something, some rule or some like duties or formal divine rule, right? The profits of the production must be reinvested in the increasing production. And this is why capitalism is called capitalism. Capitalism distinguishes capital from mere wealth. Capital consists of money, goods, and resources that are invested in production. Wealth, on the other hand, is buried in the ground and wasted on unproductive activities. A pirate who pour resources into a non-productive pyramid is not a capitalist. A pirate who loots a Spanish treasure fleet and buries a chest full of glittering coins on the beach of some Caribbean island is not a capitalist, but a hard-working factory hand who reinvests part of his income in the stock market is. The idea that the profits of production must be reinvested in increasing production sound trivial, yet this was alien to most people throughout history. In pre-modern times, people believed that the level of production was more or less constant. So why reinvest your profits if your production won't increase by much? No matter what you do, thus medieval noblemen espoused an ethic of generosity and conspicuous consumption. So that means I am capitalist or espoused an ethic of generosity is compiled, espouse, adopt, support or commit to belief. Commit, adopt / support to a belief, cause, okay, generosity and conspicuous, right, clearly visible and attracting attention, noticeable, prominent. Okay. They spent their revenues on tournaments, banquets, places in wars, and on charity and monumental cathedrals. Cathedrals. Okay. Okay, these are temples. These are visual feast of cathedrals. Those awe-inspiring monuments. Few tried to reinvest profits in increasing their manure output, developing better kind of wheat, or looking for new markets. In the modern era, the nobility has been overtaken by a new elite whose members are true believers in the capitalist creed. The new capitalist elite is made up not of dues and marquesses but of board chairmen, stock traders, and industries. These magnates are far richer than the medieval nobility, but they are far less interested in extravagant consumption. Extravagant is abundant or overabundant. Extravagant, faltu. Extravagant means faltu, right? Excessive and lavish. Over the top. And they spend a much smaller part of their profits on non-productive activities. Medieval noblemen wore colorful robes of gold and silk and devoted much of their time to attending banquets. carnivals, and glamorous tournaments. In comparison, modern CEOs don't dare don't dreary uniform called shoes that offer them all the panache of a flock of crows, and they have little time for festivities. The typical venture capitalist rushes from one business veteran to another, trying to figure out where to invest his capital and following the ups and downs of the stocks and bonds he owns. True, his suits might be Versace and he might get to travel in a private jet, but these expenses are nothing compared to what he invested in increasing human production. So, what is this? CEOs don't dairy. CEO don't dairy uniform. Don't dairy. Don't dairy. Dreary. Blending two ideas. Okay, Don is to put on. Don yani to put on. Dull and depressing. It's not just versus clad business moguls who invest to increase productivity. Ordinary folk and government agencies think along similar lines. How many dinner conversations in modest neighborhoods sooner or later bog down in interminable debate about whether it is better to invest one's savings in the stock market or bond or property? Bog down in interminable debate. Interminable. Bog down. It is not terminable. Or it is terminable or it is not. It is interminable. That means it's never gonna end without it. Stuck or delayed. Stuck with. Get stuck. Governments too strive to invest their tax revenues in productive enterprises that will increase future income. For example, building a new port could make it easier for factories to export their products, enabling them to make more taxable income, thereby increasing the government's future revenues. Another government might prefer to invest in education on the ground that educated people from the basis for the lucrative high-tech industries. Lucrative high-tech industries which pays a lot of taxes without needing extensive port facilities. Lucrative. Lucrative means, right? I don't know what the lucrative means. What is a lucrative? It's it is a great thing of profit and financial gain, and it's often used for very profitable. Lucrative is profitable. Lucrative means profitable and gainful, rewarding. Capitalism began as a theory about how the economy functioned. It was both descriptive and prescriptive. It offered an account. It offered an account of how money worked and promoted the idea that reinvesting profit and production lead to fast economic growth. But capitalism gradually became far more than just an economic doctrine. It now encompasses an ethic, a set of teaching about how people should behave, educate their children, and even think. Its principal tenet is that economic growth is the supreme good. Growth is the supreme good, or at least a proxy for the supreme good, because justice, freedom, and even happiness all depends on economic growth. So, a tenet. Okay, is a principal belief or doctrine held to true, especially ones that are central or relevant. Principal tenet, doctrine. Believed to be true, creed, belief. Ask a capitalist how to bring justice and political freedom to a place like Zimbabwe or Afghanistan, and you are likely to get a lecture on how economic affluence and thriving middle class are essential for stabilizing democratic institutions, and about the need, therefore, to inculcate Afghan tribesmen and the values of free enterprise, thrift and self-reliance. Lecture on economic affluence, influence ni affluence, which is, I don't know. Let's know the word meanings. Okay, affluence is great a deal of wealth. Economic affluence, economic richness, economic richness or prosperity. Inculcate. Inculcate. Inculcate means, okay, means to instill an idea, attitude, or habit through persistent instruction or repetition. Okay, consistency is related to consistency, right? Inculcate the value of, okay, instill an idea, implant idea, okay, in the values of free enterprise, thrift, and self-reliance. Thrift, THRIFT. Okay, what's the meaning of thrift? We are reaching into the word. Okay, thrift is a careful, efficient use of money. Thrift is the frugality or economy or prudence, thriftiness, carefulness. The values of thrift. The values of thrift and self-reliance were deeply rooted in upbringing. Thrift is careful and efficient use of money. Okay. Careful and efficient use of money. Prudence, frugality. So yeah, got it. This new religion has had a decisive influence on the development of modern science. The scientific research is usually funded by either government or private businesses. When capitalist governments and businesses consider investing in a particular scientific project, the first question are usually: will this project enable us to increase production and profits? Will it produce economic growth? A project that can't clear these hurdles has little chance of finding a sponsor. No history of modern science can leave capitalism out of the picture. Conversely, the history of capitalism is unintelligible without taking science into account. So, capitalism believes in perpetual economic growth, flies in the face of almost everything we know about the universe. A society of wolves would be extremely foolish to believe that the supply of sheep would keep on growing indefinitely. The human economy has nevertheless managed to keep on growing throughout the modern era, thanks only to the fact that scientists come up with yet another discovery or the gadget every few years, such as the continent of America, the internal combustion engine, or genetically engineered sheep. Banks and governments spend money, but ultimately it is the scientists who foot the bill. Over the last few years, banks and governments have been frenziedly printing money. Frenziedly. Frenziedly. Frenziedly meaning, I don't know what's frenziedly meaning. It's uncontrolled, emotional, uncontrollably, furiously or wildly, uncontrollably printing, uncontrollably. Okay, please guys wait for a while because I have to do something. So Sorry for the delay. So yeah, I will continue the reading book. I will continue reading the book.
अरे नानी बोलना मत, मेरे वीडियो चल रही है अभी. बोलना मत, मेरी वीडियो चल रही है.
So yeah. So now we'll know what is the meaning of frenziedly. Frenziedly means wild, uncontrolled, or emotionally charged manner. Chaotic urgency or excitement. Frantically or madly. It's chaotic urgency. Okay. It's a too confusing word. Frenziedly, which is action done in wild, action done in wild, uncontrolled manner. Okay, everybody is terrified that the money economic crisis may stop the growth of the economy. Okay, may stop the growth of economy. So they are creating trillions of dollars, euros, and yet yen out of thin air, pumping cheap credit into the system and hoping that the scientists, technicians, and engineers will manage to come up with something really big before the bubble bursts. Everything depends on the people in the labs. New discoveries in fields such as biotechnology and artificial intelligence could create entire new industries whose profits could back the trillions of make-believe money that the banks and government have created since 2008. If the labs do not fulfill these expectations before the bubble bursts, we are heading towards very rough times. Columbus searches for an investor. Capitalism played a decisive role not only in the rise of modern science but also in the emergence of European imperialism. And it was European imperialism that created the capitalist credit system in the first place. Of course, credit was not invented in modern Europe. It existed in almost all agricultural societies, and in the early modern period, the emergence of European capitalism was closely linked to economic developments in Asia. Remember too that until the late 18th century, Asia was the world's economic powerhouse, meaning that Europeans had far less capital at their disposal than the Chinese, Muslims, and Indians. However, in the socio-political systems of China, India, and the Muslim world, credit played only a second role. Merchants and bankers in the market of Istanbul, Isfahan, Delhi, and Beijing may have thought along capitalist lines, but the kings and journals in the places and force tended to despise merchants and mercantile thinking. Mercantile thinking. Mercantile. Related to trade, commerce, commercial. Most non-European empires of the early modern era were established by great conquerors such as Nurhaci and Nadir Shah, or by bureaucratic and military elites as in the Qing and Ottoman empires, financing wars through taxes and plunder. They owe little to credit systems. Plunder is without making fine distinction between the two. In Europe, on the other hand, kings and generals gradually adopted the mercantile way of thinking until merchants and bankers became the ruling elite. The European conquest of the world was increasingly financed through credit rather than taxes, and was increasingly directed by capitalists whose main ambition was to receive maximum returns on their investments. The empire built by bankers and the merchants in frock coats and top hats, defeated the empire built by the kings and noblemen in gold clothes and shining armor. The mercantile empire was simply much shrewder in financing their conquest. Nobody wants to pay taxes, but everyone is happy to invest in it. In 1484, Christopher Columbus approached the king of Portugal with the proposal that he finance a fleet that he would sail westward to find a new trade route to East Asia. Such explanations were a very risky and costly business. A lot of money was needed in order to build ships, buy supplies, and pay sailors and soldiers, and there was no guarantee that the investment would return. The king of Portugal declined. Like a present-day startup entrepreneur, Columbus did not give up. He pitched his idea to other potential investors in Italy, France, England, and again in Portugal. Each time he was rejected, then he tried his luck with Ferdinand and Isabella, rulers of newly united Spain. He took on some experienced lobbyists, and with their help, he managed to convince Queen Isabella to invest. Lobbyists, Gee, lobbyist. What is lobbyist? I don't know. Experienced lobbyist. It's just type of doctor. Try to influence lawmakers, government officials on behalf of a particular group. Advocate policy influencers. Okay, policy influencers. That means tries to influence lawmakers. Who tried influence lawmaker? A hundred. Okay, as every school child knows, Isabella hit the jackpot. Columbus discovered an animal, the Spaniards to conquer America, where they established gold and silver mines as well as sugar and tobacco plantations that enriched the Spanish kings, bankers and merchants beyond their wildest dreams. 100 years later, princes and bankers were willing to extend far more credit to Columbus' successors, and they had more capital at their disposal thanks to the treasures reaped from America. Equally important, princes and bankers had far more trust in the potential of exploration and were more willing to part with their money. This was the magic circle of imperial capitalism. Credit financed new discoveries. Discoveries led to colonies. Colonies provided profits. Profit built trust, and trust translated into more credit. Nurhaki and Nader ran out of fuel after a few thousand kilometers. Capitalist entrepreneurs only increased their financial momentum from conquest to conquest. But these expeditions remained chancy affairs, so credit markets nevertheless remained quite cautious. Many expeditions returned to Europe empty-handed, having discovered nothing of value. The English, for instance, wasted a lot of capital and fruitless attempts to discover a northwestern passage to Asia through the Arctic. Many other expeditions didn't return at all. Ships hit icebergs, foundered in tropical storms, or fell victim to pirates. In order to increase the number of potential investors and reduce the risk they incurred, Europeans turned to limited liability joint stock companies. Foundered in tropical storms. यानी कि खत्म. Foundered. What is foundered? Foundered is not a core meaning. A failure or collapse. Yeah. Instead of a single investor betting all his money on a single rickety ship, poorly made, unstable. Okay. The joint stock company collected money from a large number of investors, each risking only a small portion of his capital. The risks were thereby curtailed, but no cap was placed on the profits. Even a small investment in the right ship could turn you into a millionaire. Curtailed means reduce. Yeah, right. Curtail means reduce. So reduce limit. To reduce or limit, cut short something. To reduce or limit. Slash limit something. Even a small investment in the right ship could turn you into a millionaire. Decade by decade, Western Europe witnessed the development of a sophisticated financial system that could raise large amount of credit on short notice and put it at the disposal of private entrepreneurs and governments. The system could finance exploration and conquest far more efficiently than any kingdom or empire. The newfound power of the Brit can be seen in the British struggle between Spain and the Netherlands. In the 16th century, Spain was the most powerful state in Europe, holding sway over a vast global empire. It ruled much of Europe, huge chunks of North and South America. Okay. It ruled much of Europe, huge chunks of North and South America, the Philippine Islands, and a string of bases along the coast of Africa and Asia. Every year, fleets heavy with American and Asian treasure returned to the ports of Seville and Cadiz. The Netherlands was a small and windy swamp, devoid of natural resources and a tiny corner of the king of Spain's dominion. In 1568, the Dutch, who were mainly Protestant, revolted against their Catholic Spanish overlord. At first, the rebels seemed to play the role of Don Quixote, courageously tilting at invincible windmills, yet within 80 years, the Dutch had not only secured their independence from Spain but had managed to replace the Spaniards and the Portuguese allies as the master of ocean highway, build a global Dutch empire, and become the richest state in Europe. The secret of Dutch success was credit. The Dutch burghers, who had little taste of combat on land, hired mercenary armies to fight the Spanish for them. The Dutch themselves, meanwhile, took to the sea in ever larger fleets. Mercenary armies and cannon brandishing fleets cost a fortune, but the Dutch were able to finance their military expeditions more easily than the mighty Spanish Empire because they secured the trust of the Burgundian. Burgundian means expanding. Expanding. Uh, Burgundian economy, European financial system at the time when the Spanish king was carelessly eroding its trust in him. Financier extended Dutch enough credit to set up armies and fleets, and these armies and fleets gave the Dutch control of world's trade routes, which in turn yielded handsome profit. The profits allowed the Dutch to repay the loans, which strengthened the trust of the financiers. Amsterdam was fast becoming not only one of the most important ports of Europe but also the continent's financial mecca. How exactly did the Dutch win the trust of the financial system? Firstly, they were sticklers about repaying their loans on time and in full, and making the extension of credit less risky for lenders. Secondly, their country's judicial system enjoyed independence and protected private rights, in particular private property rights. Capital trickles away from dictatorial states that fail to defend private individuals and their property. Instead, it flows into a state upholding the rule of law and private property. This is the core message of capitalism. Imagine that you are the son of a solid family of German financiers. Your father sees an opportunity to expand the business by opening branches in major European cities. He sends you to Amsterdam and your younger brother to Madrid, giving you each 10,000 gold coins to invest. Your brother lands in the startup capital and interest for the king of Spain who needed to raise an army to fight the king of France. You decide to lend yours to a Dutch merchant who wanted to invest a scrub land on the southern of a desolate island called Manhattan. Certain that property values there will be skyrocketed, the Hudson River turns into a major trade artery. Both loans are to be repaid within a year. The year passes. The Dutch merchant sells the land he bought at the handsome markup and repays your money with the interest he promised. Your father is pleased, but your little brother in Madrid is getting nervous. The war with France ended well for the king of Spain, but he was now embroiled himself in a conflict with the Turks. He needed every penny to finance the new war and thinks this is far more important than repaying old debts. Your brother sends letter to the palace and asks friends with a connection at our court, intercede but to no avail. Not only has your brother not earned the promised interest, he lost the principal. Your father is not pleased. Embroiled himself. He has now embroiled himself in a conflict. Embroiled means deeply involved in conflict. Deeply involved or entangled. फंसा हुआ. Okay. Now to make matters worse, the king sends a treasury official to your brother to tell him, in no uncertain terms, that he expects to receive another loan of the same worth. Your brother has no money to lend. He writes a home to dad, trying to persuade him that this time the king will come through. The paterfamilias, has a soft spot for his Genghis and agrees with a heavy heart. Another 10,000 word disappeared into the Spanish treasury and never to be seen again. Meanwhile, in Amsterdam, things are looking bright. More and more laws enterprising Dutch merchants will repay them promptly and in full. Promptly and in full. Repay on time and in full. On time and in full. On time and in full. What's the meaning of this? It's central to logistics, supply chains, and reliability. OTIF is a performance metric. delivery reliability, fulfillment accuracy, order completeness. Okay. But your luck doesn't hold indefinitely. One of your usual clients has a hunch that brand clocks are going to be the next fashion craze in Paris and ask you for a longer setup. Footwear emporium in French capital. You lend him the money, but unfortunately the clocks don't catch on with the French ladies, and the disgruntled merchant refuses to repay the loan. Disgruntled. Disgruntled means dissatisfaction. Unhappy, annoyed, or unhappy, annoyed, or resentful, grumpy, recently. Okay, your father is furious and tells both of you it is time to unleash the lawyers. Your brother flies suit in Madrid against the Spanish monarch, while you file suit and Amsterdam against the erstwhile United Kingdom. In Spain, the law courts are subservient to the king. The judges serve as please and inheritance if they do not do his will. In the Netherlands, the courts are a separate branch of government, not dependent on the country's burghers and princes. The court in Madrid throws out your brother's suit, while the courts in Amsterdam finds in your favor and put a lien cloth merchandise to force it to pay. Burgess, B-U-R-G-H-E-R. Burgess is what? Burgess. Burgess and princes. Official, rich, historical, associate layer. Okay, citizens of a town belonging to the middle and the mercantile class. Townspeople. Your father runs. Listen, better to do business with merchants than with kings, and better to do it in Holland than in Madrid. And your brother's travels are not over. Travels is problems or conflicts. Travels are not over. The king of Spain desperately needs more money to pay his army, which is painful, laborious efforts, painful struggles, painful efforts. Struggle is not over. Okay, this person needs more money. He's sure that your father had cash to spare, so he brings a trumped up treason charges against your brother. If he doesn't come up with the 20,000 gold coins first, well, he will get cast into a dungeon and told the mountain to dice. Cast into a dungeon. Cast into D-U-N-G-O. Dungeon. What is dungeon? Your phrase, Steve, in a drama and historical world. Thrown or confined into dark underground prison. Thrown into prison. Your father has had enough. He pays the ransom for his beloved son, but so he is never to do the business in Spain again. He closes his Madrid branch and relocates your brother to Rotterdam. Two branches in Holland now look like a really good idea. He hears that even Spanish capitalists are smuggling their fortunes out of their country. They too realize that if they want to keep their money and use it to gain more wealth, they are better off investing it where the rule prevails and where private property is respected in Netherlands, for example. In such ways did the King of Spain squander the trust of investors. At the same time, the Dutch merchants gained their confidence, and it was the Dutch merchants, not the Dutch state, who built the Dutch Empire. The King of Spain kept on trying to finance and maintain his conquest by raising unpopular taxes from a disgruntled populace. From the Dutch merchant finance conquest by getting loans, increasingly also by selling shares in companies that entitled their holders to receive a portion of company's profit. Cautious investors who would never have given their money to the King of Spain have thought twice before extending credit to the Dutch government. Happily invested fortunes in the Dutch joint stock companies that were the mainstay of the new empire. So there are 2-3 words: disgruntled, opulence, and squander. So firstly, squander. The king of scam, squander the trust means destroyed the trust. Squander means destroyed or waste something or wasted, throw away. Wasted. If you had disgruntled, disgruntled populace, P-O-P-U-L-A-N-C, populace, oh populace, sorry, populace name is populace. Okay, a group of citizens of the Junior W who are unhappy, dissatisfied, discontented citizen, dissatisfied masses. Okay, frustrated community, frustrated. If you thought a company was going to make a big profit but it had already sold all its shares, you could buy some from people who owned them, probably for a higher price than they originally paid. If you bought shares and it discovered that the company was in dire straits, you could try to unload your stocks for a lower price. The resulting trade in company share led to the establishment in most major European cities of stock exchanges, places where the shares of the companies were traded. It was in dire straits. And it's very bad and difficult situation. And deep trouble. The most famous Dutch joint stock company, the Verenigde Oostenrijkse Company, or VOC for short, was chartered in 1602, just as the Dutch were throwing off Spanish rule and the boom of Spanish artillery could still be heard not far from Amsterdam's ramparts. VOC used the money it raised from selling shares to build ships, send them to Asia, and bring back Chinese, Italian, and Indonesian goods. It also financed military action taken by company ships against competitors and pirates. Eventually, VOC money financed the conquest of Indonesia. Indonesia is the world's biggest archipelago. Archipelago is a group or chain of islands, often scattered across sea or ocean. Body of water containing many islands. Island chain. Its thousands upon thousands of islands were ruled in the early 17th century by hundreds of kingdoms, principalities, sultanates, and tribes. When VOC merchant first arrived in Indonesia in 1603, their aims were strictly commercial. However, in order to secure their commercial interests and maximize the profits of the shareholders, VOC merchants began to fight against local potentates who charged inflated tariffs, as well as against European competitors. VOC armed its merchant ships with cannons. It recruited European, Japanese, Indian, and Indonesian mercenaries, and it built forts and conducted full-scale battles and sieges. This enterprise may sound a little strange to us, but in the early modern stage, it was common for private companies to hire not only soldiers but also generals and admirals, cannons and ships, and even entire off-the-shelf armies. The international community took this for granted and didn't raise an eyebrow when the private company established an empire. Island after island fell to VOC mercenaries, and a large part of Indonesia became a VOC colony. VOC ruled Indonesia for close to 200 years, and only in 1800 did the Dutch state assume control of Indonesia, making it a Dutch national colony for the following 150 years. 150, which means 950. Today, some people warn that 21st century corporations are accumulating too much power. Early modern history shows just how far that can go if businesses are allowed to pursue their self-interest unchecked. So while VOC operated in the Indian Ocean, the Dutch West Indies companies, or WIC, piled the Atlantic in order to control trade on the important Hudson River.
WIC built a settlement called New Amsterdam on an island at the river's mouth. The colony was threatened by Native Americans and repeatedly attacked by the British, who eventually captured it in 1664. The British changed its name to New York. The remains of wall built by WIC to defend its colony against Native Americans and British are today paved over by the world's most famous street, Wall Street. Oh, the origin of Wall Street. As the 17th century wound to an end, complacency and costly continentals war caused the Dutch to lose not only New York but also their places as Europe's financial and imperial engine. The vacancy. The vacancy was hotly contested by France and Britain. At first, France seemed to be in far stronger position, but it was bigger than Britain, richer, more populous, and possessed a large and more experienced army. Yet, Britain managed to win the trust of the financial system, whereas France proved itself unworthy. The behavior of the French crown was particularly notorious during what called Mississippi bubble, the large financial crisis of 18th century Europe. That story also began with an empire-building joint stock company. In 1770, the Mississippi Company chartered and finance set out to colonize the lower Mississippi Valley, establishing the city of New Orleans in the process. To finance its ambitious plans, the company, which had good connections at the court of King Louis XVI or King Louis XV, sold shares on the Paris Stock Exchange. John Law, the company's director, was also the governor of the Central Bank of France. Furthermore, the king had appointed him Controller General of Finances, an office roughly equivalent to that modern finance minister. In 1717, the lower Mississippi Valley in 1717 lower Mississippi Valley offered new attraction besides swamps and alligators, yet the Mississippi Company spread tales of fabulous riches and boundless opportunities. French aristocrat businessmen and stolid members of the urban bourgeoisie fell for these fantasies and Mississippi share price skyrocketed. Initially shares were offered at 500 livre a piece. Calm and dependable. Bourgeoisie. Bourgeoisie is bourgeois, middle class, especially materialistic middle class. Okay, on 1 August 1719, shares traded at 2750 livre, and by 30 August they were worth 4100 livre, and on 4 September they reached 5000 livre. On 2nd December, the price of a Mississippi share crossed the threshold of 10,000. Euphoria swept the street of Paris. Euphoria is an excitement or shock. Euphoria, a state of intense happiness, excitement. People sold all their possessions and took huge loans in order to buy Mississippi shares. Everybody believed it to discover the easy way to riches. A few days later, the panic began. Some spectators realized that the share price were totally unrealistic, unsustainable. They figured that they had better sell while stock were at their peak. As the supply of shares available rose, their price declined. When other investors saw the price going down, they also wanted to get out quick. The stock price plummeted further, setting off an avalanche. In order to stabilize prices, the Central Bank of France, as the direction of its governor, John Law, got up Mississippi share, but it could not do so forever. Eventually, it ran out of money.
When this happened, the Controller General of Finance, the same John Law, authorized the printing of more money in order to buy additional shares. This placed the entire French financial system inside the bubble, and not even its financial wizardry could save the day. The price of Mississippi share dropped from 10,000 livres back to 1,000 and then collapsed completely, and the shares lost every so of their worth. By now, the central bank and the Royal Treasury owned a large or a huge amount of worthless stock and had no money. The big speculator emerged largely unscathed, and they had sold in time. Small investors lost everything, and many committed suicide. The Mississippi bubble was one of history's most spectacular financial crises. The Royal French financial system never recuperated fully from the blow. Recuperated यानी कि recovered. Recuperated means recovered. The way in which the Mississippi Company used its political clout, political belief, or political influence, like clout as influence, right? The political clout. Okay, influence, right? To manipulate share prices and fuel the buying frenzy caused the public to lose faith in the French banking system and in financial wisdom of the French King Louis. Louis XV found it more and more difficult to raise credit. This became one of the chief reasons that overseas French Empire fell into British hands. While the British could borrow money easily at the low interest rates, France had difficulties securing loans and had to pay high interest on them. In order to finance his growing debts, and the King of France borrowed more and more money at higher and higher interests. Eventually, in 1780s, Louis XVI, who had ascended to the throne of its grandfather's death, realized that half his annual budget was tied to servicing the interest of his loans, and that he was heading toward bankruptcy. Reluctantly, in 1789, Louis XVI convened the States General. Reluctant. Reluctantly means hesitantly or unwillingly. Hesitate or unwillingly or convened, C-O-N-V-N. Convened the State General, the French Parliament, that had not met for a century and a half in order to find the solution to the crisis. Thus began the French Revolution. Summoned or called together. Which is known as the French Revolution. While the French overseas empires was crumbling, the British Empire was expanding rapidly. Like the Dutch Empire before it, the British Empire was established and run largely by private joint stock companies based in the London Stock Exchange. The first English settlement in North America was established in the early 17th century by joint stock companies such as the London Company, the Plymouth Company, the Dorchester Company, and the Massachusetts Company. Okay, crumbling is crumbling, right? Like this now. How can describe it? It was very crumbling, breaking parts into small fragments, right? Collapsing. The Indian subcontinent too was conquered not by the British state but by the mercenary army of British East India Company. This company outperformed even the VOC from its headquarters in Leaden Street, London. It ruled a mighty Indian empire for about a century, maintaining a huge military force of up to 350,000 soldiers, considerably outnumbering the armed forces of the British monarchy. Only in 1858 did the British Crown nationalize India along with the company's private army. Napoleon made fun of the British, calling them a nation of shopkeepers. Yet those shopkeepers defeated Napoleon himself, and their empire was the largest world has ever seen. Okay, now we will just conclude this live session. Firstly, we will revise all the learn today, and then we'll just go. Please like, share, and subscribe to the channel. Inculcate, to instill ideas or habits through persistent instructions, formal or educational. Thrift, wise use of money, means you are very thrifty, right? Frenziedly, in a wild, dramatic, or frantic way. Mercantile, related to trade or commerce. Lobbyist, someone who influenced lawmakers. Foundered, collapsed. Rickety, unstable or poorly built. Rickety buildings or rickety financial systems, or rickety banks. Curtailed, reduced. Embroiled, deeply involved. Embroiled means entangled or deeply involved. On time and in full. Delivered completely and punctually. Disgruntled, annoyed. Murderous, citizens, travels, painful and laborious efforts. Cast into dungeon, यानी कि जेल में डाल दिया, which is thrown into imprisonment. Squandered, waste money. Disgruntled populace, disqualified public. In dire straits, in a very difficult or dangerous situation. Archipelago, a group of chain of islands. Stolid, emotionally unexpressive, calm and independable. Bourgeois, the middle owning class. Euphoria, intense happiness or well-being. Clout, influence or power, reluctantly in a hesitant way. Convent, called together for a funeral, you are summoned or called together. Crumbling, falling apart, pissing, degrading. Okay. Thank you for the meeting. So now we are ending the stream. Okay.